question is, if there are just 10 teams, why we need to watch 45 different games? Why? 10 teams and 45 games? Of course, because you need to combine them. And the final number is 45. Let's make the next experiment. Let's convince Mexico to join the qualifier in South America, and then we're not going to have 10 teams, or now we're going to have 11 teams. Question for you. The number of games increases from 45 to 46 because we have one additional country? No, it jumped from 45 to 65. 10 more games just for adding one country. That is productivity. When you add an addition, a unit of additional labor or capital, you have the ability to create lots of much more stuff because it's something different. That is the magic of productivity. Then, we can understand humankind history just looking at this Lego piece game or metaphor. 300,000 years ago, we appeared as a human, as a Homo sapiens sapiens in this planet. And from that time till now, we have been able to create pieces of Lego. From the very beginning, the very basic tools, and then the second industrial revolution, more different kind of pieces. And now, in the third and the fourth industrial revolution, we have been able, as a human beings, to produce lots of pieces. But not the same pieces, different pieces. That is productivity. And this is correlated with this graph, which is extremely interesting. This graph portrays the accumulation of knowledge since we have been here on Earth. And two messages. From the first, agriculture, the first industrial revolution, second, the third one, and the fourth one, we realized that from the 80s, from the beginning of the 80s and ends of the 70s, the humankind has been able to produce more knowledge than in the whole period before the 80s till we appear on Earth. And it's really incredible. Really incredible. There are some calculations that says that every 5 or 10 years, humankind duplicates all the knowledge that we have been able to create. Why this is important? This is important with what this graph is telling you, is that what the explosion of innovation and creativity has given the world opportunities to create magic and to make this number of combinations to progress and create more wealth. And this is a straightforward graph that shows you that. This is from the beginning of the 16th century till the beginning of the 21st century. GDP per capita explode only in the beginning of the 20th century. So there is something interesting here. When I was a student of economics at the university, I understood that production increased because two options. You increase more capital or you increase more labor. People or capital. And something interesting here, which is wrong. If that is right, what I just said, this jump means that the planet, we as a population, we increase several times, and also capital increased several times. That wasn't true, right? Because the population on Earth haven't gone to that jump on capital either. The reason why that is happening is that production has been increased, not because the factors of production has increased. It's because the way that we are doing things has changed because of science, technology, creativity, and innovation. That's all the good news. The not so good news is that this process of accumulating different pieces of Lego has been very unequal. The dark blue line it's a density graph that shows you all the countries in the world in 1960. And we have two messages from that. First, that the bunch of countries at that year were really poor, concentrated here. But at the same time, the distance between the poorest and the richest was not so long. Inequality was not so high. But what happened when the humanity increased productivity and they created new Lego pieces? Most countries now are not so poor. They moved from being very poor to have like middle income or low middle income. But inequality increased a lot. What this graph is telling us that even though the number of Lego pieces has been increased a lot because of knowledge, the distribution of those pieces has been absolutely unequal. There are countries in the world that 40 years later, they have the same exact set of Lego pieces, while others have been, buy or created much bigger, more complex sets of Lego pieces. But this first part of the presentation, in order to try to share with you what should be done in Latin America and Peru, start from first understanding what productivity is. Because if we don't understand that, it's going to be really difficult to get the idea, and of course, to try to create and implement the solutions for it. So, which are the determinants of productivity? Julio, I totally agree with you. It's nice that you explained to me what productivity is, but tell me which are the factors and the variables that explain why countries have more Lego pieces. So in order to do that, I'm going to rely on work of Ricardo Guzmán. It's a professor at Harvard University. He has dedicated many years of his life to try to understand the determinants of productivity. The Lego pieces are hundreds of thousands of different Lego pieces. But what I'm going to show you here, it's some of them and some dimensions of productivity that represent a specific number of Lego pieces. And of course, to share with you this graph and this tree, I would like to rely on an anecdote that happened to me when I was campaigning through Peru. Because if we don't link productivity with the daily life of people, what is the point? I was campaigning in Ayacucho. Ayacucho is one of the poorest places in Peru. I'm sure that some of the Peruvians that are here have been in Ayacucho. Ayacucho is the place when Shining Path was born. Really, really poor place. It's very high, from 2,500 meters above level till 43 or 4,400 meters out of the sea. It's very complex. Roads are not aligned. Like here in the States, you take the 90 or the 55 and it's aligned. In Peru, the roads are like this. Why? Because you need to get into the mountain. So the cost of building roads is much, it's much more expensive. The technicalities of building roads is much more expensive, much more complicated. So when I was going from the airport to the city, the driver in the taxi cab started talking to me. His name is Raul. And I was talking to him and I asked Raul, do you just dedicate all your time driving? I said, yes, I would like to change. Oh, that's great. What do you want to do? And he told me, I would like to create a business, selling potatoes to all the restaurants in the city of Ayacucho. Oh, that's nice. And why? Well, Julio, here in Ayacucho, we have lots of different kinds of potatoes. In Ayacucho, there are like more than 300 types of potatoes. It's not like here that you go to a supermarket and you find two. And you have 3 and different colors, from pink, red, blue, purple. Amazing. So if we have such an amazing number of potatoes, what I'm going to do is just to cook the potatoes, to frozen them in plastics, and then sell it to the restaurants to be ready just to fry it and sell it. That's a wonderful idea. I wish you the best. So for Raul, in order to be successful and in order to be productive, Raul needs to solve different kind of problems. The first one is to access to credit. If Raul doesn't have access to credit, he cannot be successful. But in order to access to credit, we have 2 limitations. The first one is the world. If if the world is under crisis, under financial crisis, it's impossible for Raul to do that because interest rates are going to be really high. But let's imagine that the world is doing fine. Still, Raul cannot get access to credit because something wrong is happening within the country. And within the country could be happening two things. First one, that there could be a low bancarization ratio. What it means, pretty simple. There are no banks. There are no physical infrastructures, offices, bank offices in which you can go and ask for a credit. That means bancarization. But on the other hand, it could be a problem of low savings, that you have the bank, you go to the bank, you ask for a credit, and they cannot give you the credit because they don't have the liquidity in order to do that. So the first area of the first group of Lego pieces are related with credit. But now let's imagine just for a moment that we are living in the perfect country, which the credits dimension is absolutely resolved. Raul will still have problems. Why? Because maybe there are variables that are related with the setting in which he's operating that do not allow him to be productive. For instance, bad infrastructure. Let's imagine that Raul is amazing selecting the potatoes, cutting them, putting on bags. They have clients everywhere, but there are no roads. Or the roads are in horrible state. As in Ayacucho, indeed, when you go from Huancavelica to Ayacucho, it's incredible because you go to a car, there is just space for a car, and if you put your side there, you don't see the road. You see like 1,000 meters above. And there is no something that limits that road. There is nothing that the car could, no, there is nothing, just empty space. So if you have bad infrastructure, it's absolutely absurd talking about businesses in that area. But at the same time, it scares human capital. Raul is going to be able to run a business if they don't have the people to hire, that have the skills to run that business. And geography, of course. As I already explained, geography plays a very important role. In the case of Ayacucho, it's not only the diversity of the geography and the problems dealing with the construction of roads, but also it's natural disasters. In Peru, every single year, you go to a road in the mountains and it's blocked because of the huaicos, because of the deslizamientos de montañas. It's a part of the mountain just because there's so much rain, a portion of the mountain just boom, and block the roads. So running a business and being productive means lots of things, many things that represent these Lego pieces. But not only that, let's imagine that we live in a country in which everything I told you is resolved. Even in that case, we have more obstacles to overcome. Government failures. If we have a country in which the exchange rate is going up and down, up and down, up and down, prices are increasing all the time, like what's going on in Venezuela right now, who is going to be productive to run a business? Nobody. So stability is very important, and that's the role of the government. But at the same time, the micro risk linked to the government, like property rights. Raul created this very successful company selling potatoes to the restaurants, and he put the name of his company was Raul and Family. Amazing. Everyone knows about Raul and Family Enterprise because it's the best. So there were people in Ayacucho who said, oh, I would like to do the same, but I'm going to steal the name because the name has already a market value. So I'm going to steal the name. Okay? In a country like Peru, in which property rights doesn't work, Raul could lose the brand of his company, and he cannot be productive. And the same with corruption. If Raul needs to pay a bribe for an official every time he signs a deal with the local government to provide potatoes, then it's not possible to run a business. And the same with personal security, that is crime. But the problems for Raul are still there. Finally, we have market failures. Market failures I'm going to explain just two. The first one is the lack of complementary services, which is a very simple concept. Let's imagine that Raul has the potatoes. He cooks very well, but in Ayacucho, there is not a single company selling the plastic bags. So when you run a business, there should be conditions of parallel, of complementary services in order for you to be productive. Like a Lego pieces. When I built a castle for my little girl, if we want to build a tower, of course we need to build a base. And in order to build the base, it's not building bottom to up. It's building in a transversal, horizontal way, right? It's the same. When you want to create a business from bottom to up, to the top, you need something horizontal that is already set out there. And the second obstacle that is related with market failures is the lack of diversified products. And this is something that requires a little bit of explanation because it's not so straightforward. Why this is important? This is important because more of the ideas that people have in order to create new businesses are not because they are so brilliant, are not because they are genius and they just woke up one day and they say, oh, I have a dream and I have this wonderful idea of what to do. What happens most of the time is that the ideas about businesses are related with the things that already exist. For instance, my iPhone, I don't know where it is. The iPhone 10 is a result of the iPhone 9, and 9 and the 8 and so on. But then the iPhone, I don't know what the number was of the first one, was the combination between the telephone and the iPod. But the iPod was the result of MP3. And MP3 was the result of different technology. So technology and knowledge is built in that way. In a country, in a setting, in which young people who have ideas live in countries in which you have lots of services and products and you interact with people that are developing ideas, the likelihood that this young is going to come up with a great idea is higher. So when you build, or when you work, or when you try to create a new business in a countries that are not diversified in the production matrix, the likelihood to create something new is much lower. So this is the tree. This is some of the Lego pieces. My expectation is not for you to remember all these things. My expectation is that you remember that creating well-being and progress mean to combine different things. Means that magic. It doesn't mean that if a country receives just capital, the country is gonna do well. No, that's not true. And I'm gonna try to explain a little bit further why I really believe on that. So the next question, the third question, ones that we already discussed, what productivity is. Now that we already discussed which are the determinants of productivity, the next question is, and what happened in Peru? You showed me, Julio, at the very beginning, 15 consecutive years of economic growth. Well, I would like to know now, what kind of growth was that? It was a growth based on, because there were more capital and more people, or because there was a growth, because there was innovation and creativity and productivity and this magic. So unfortunately, the answer is no. This graph, I'm very proud of this graph because I made it with my assistant, and we were very careful and being very consistent across the time. This is 1960 till 2010. And the darker blue line is a GDP per capita. What we have done is we have made this decomposition of GDP per capita for different sources. I'm sorry. This is a very known, a very basic technique across economists. We are decompositing the GDP per capita in three sources. The first source, which is the light blue, is capital. How much of economic growth is explained just for the fact that someone put capital into the country? That's it. That's it. Let's imagine that an investor from the US or Europe has decided to invest $1 billion and money, a transfer agent, a financial transfer, put it there. So That's it. The second one, the green one, is about labor force. How much of the economic growth is explained because there were more people? That's it, no more than that. And in order to explain that, I'm gonna make an example right now. Let's imagine that all of us who are in this room, we are citizens from just one country, we live in one country, and we produce X amount. Let's imagine that we decided to open the door for 10 more people. Tomorrow, what's gonna be the production? More, of course, because there are more people. That means that we're gonna be better? No. That means that we're gonna be more creative because there are more people? No. It's just that we are producing more because there are more people. That's the only explanation. So the green line explains the portion of the GDP per capita in Peru that is explained just for more labor force. And the orange line is the magic. The orange line is this something new, valuable that we are creating because we have been more productive, because our minds are exploding, because we are innovating, because we are doing research, because we are creating new ways of resolving problems. Unfortunately, the orange line in Peru in 50 years is flat. 50 consecutive years is flat. Economic growth in Peru is happening for one reason. In Peru, we have everything. We have our sea, that is amazing, one of the most productive seas in the world, the Pacific Ocean. We have minerals. We are number 1 in gold. We are number 2 in copper. We're number 4 in zinc. If you give me right now the table of the chemical elements, Peru have all of them. And we have the Amazon, we have the forest, you name it. And the reason why we're doing this is because capital is coming a lot in Peru because there are lots of mining. That's it. This table is really interesting. We already made this table just comparing the US and Peru. I'm not going to go through all this data, but I would like just to focus on the two numbers that are circled. They tell you that between 1950 and 2014, from the 100% of economic growth in the United States, for everything that the United States created in that period, 30%, 29%, almost 30% was magic. Magic. Productivity. The country explores and discovers new ways of doing things with the same resources. Because of education, because of innovation, because of science, technology, research. In Peru, the whole period, just 3% is because of productivity. 97% is just because we increase labor force and we increase capital. Capital because of our natural resource endowments, and labor force because we are experiencing a demographic boom. Peru is experiencing one of the highest demographic booms in the world. 60% of Peruvian population is between 18 and 40 years old. 60%. This is a graph that shows you the difference in productivity evolution between Peru, the United States, and the Asian tigers. I liked this year, 74, because it's the breaking point in which some of the countries of Asia just jumped in terms of productivity because of the reason that most of us already know. When I confront some of my ideas with some of Peruvian economists, they tell me, no, Julio, you're wrong. You're wrong because see the data. No, you're totally wrong. In 1950 and 2015, economic growth, this is the GDP, the sectoral GDP. It's amazing how we have grown. It's incredible. And if you see, this consistent over time. Yeah, in fishing, manufacturing, construction, trade, electricity, mining, agriculture, they're wrong. So I respond to them. okay, I'm gonna use your same data, but I'm gonna put the data in a different way. So what I did is just to change the absolute terms in terms of percentage. The same period, the same data, the same sectors. My response was, yes, we have grown, but we are doing exactly the same like 50 years ago. Because the share of every sector is exactly the same. So that means that we are doing the same things. Because more capital and more labor accounted. Several weeks ago, a friend of mine who is not Peruvian, we were talking about Peru, like is very usual in my case. And he told me, oh, I've been in Peru 2 months ago. Oh, that's wonderful. Is this your first time in Peru? I said, no, I was in Peru 15 years ago too. Oh, interesting. So, what do you want to tell me about these two experiences? But one of the things that surprised me, he told me, is that I returned 15 years later, and there are the same companies running the country in Peru. Here in the States, in Europe, there are absolutely new products, new services, and different companies that have emerged and have displaced the most important companies like 15 years ago. In Peru, it's the same. Of course, we have grown. Of course, we have making some progress. But structurally speaking, we are doing exactly the same 15 years ago. I'm going to use again information from the International Center of Development at Harvard University, because it helped me very much to try to go much more in detail of what I'm saying. This is year 1968, and this country is Thailand. This graph is 100% of exports from Thailand to the world. And the colors mean the different kind of products. The colors that you find on the left that are lighter is natural resources. I'm not going to go in detail what every color means. But on the right, the colors that are darker are industry, as value added, technology. So Thailand in 1968 exports mining, vegetables, and had a small portion of the economy in industry. Well, 40 years later, 2008, Thailand is a complete different country. All the blue lights are high-tech, electronics, software, microchips. Thailand changed completely, and the natural resource portion became that little square that is on the top right of the graph. It was amazing, incredible. If we look at data from Korea, that most of the production was agriculture stuff, it's even more accentuated. Korea is now a completely different country. They changed the productivity matrix from natural resource oriented to a country that exports high value added. If we go to South America and take a look at Brazil, 1968, the production of soya, is very high demand, and also minerals, a small portion of industry. 40 years later, Brazil now produces airplanes. The change has not been as accentuated as the Asian countries that I show you, but there is a difference. There is a change. There is a structural change. Let's take a look at Peru. Peru, this is not high tech, this is fishing. This is floor. This is copper, gold, zinc, minerals, vegetables, and industry is just this line. Okay, in 1968. 40 years later, it's almost the same. It looks like it's frozen. It looks like nothing happened. The only industry that appears in Peru, there are two important industries. Agro-industry, because of this, how strong is our agriculture that became value added, and now we export mangoes and asparagus and avocado everywhere. And textile. But aside from that, it's insane. In 1968, 75% of our export were natural resource based. Now, in 2018, 75% of our export are natural resource based. The same proportion. something that is really hard to understand, that have an answer, but it's really hard to understand, is why this is happening in Peru. Peru is one of the most integrated countries in the world. If you make a ranking about how integrated, talking in terms of trade, are the countries in the world, Peru is one of the 10 most integrated in the world. This graph shows you every single free trade agreement that every single country in Las Americas has signed with other parts of the world. This is called the spaghetti bowl. It's called by a friend of mine. A friend of mine was Jeremy Harris, who is a very close friend of mine from the IDB, was the one who was responsible to make this graph for the first time. This graph is very well known now across the country, across the globe, but he was the responsible of doing it. When he finished the graph, he took a look at it, and he said, oh, this looks like a spaghetti bowl, so I'm going to call it spaghetti bowl. And now everyone uses that term. Which is interesting about this graph is that if you see the countries that are more integrated to the world, you realize that are the United States, Chile, and Peru. So the question is, 20 years ago, someone told us that if you get into globalization, it's going to be okay, right? Everyone is going to be good. We're going to have progress. So what's going on? What is going on is that Peru, with all the free trade agreements and the integration and everything, it looks like Peru owns a store in Broadway with the 42, because everyone is talking about Peru. It's growing, have a lot of FTAs. It's like having a store in Broadway and 42. Everyone would like to be there to sell their products. And Peru is an excellent position because they have all this agreement with people, so it's like being there. The problem is that when the clients get into our store, they find nothing to buy. What is the point of signing an FTA with the United States or with China if you don't have product to sell? Because mining, they don't need FTAs. They don't need FTAs. The idea of globalization, it's a coin of two faces. One face is the integration, is the being integrated with the world, so FTAs is one option, but the other one is the productive side, is the productive matrix. If you integrate to the world and you don't have what to sell them, there is no point. You need to work in both phases at the same time. And we have not done that in Peru. Then again, I'm going to return to the example of the Lego pieces. Over time, my perception, seeing the data, analyzing what has been going on in Peru, my impression is that over 50 years, yes, we have grown. It's true. Nobody could say the contrary because it's true. We have grown, but we possess exactly the same house. It's like growing, but being the same. Other countries, they were like us 50 years ago, and now they have a big house, maybe not as big as we have in Peru, but completely different, with different things, with different services, with different spaces. You can play basketball, you can watch cable TV, you can cut your grass. That is progress. That is well-being. When you create new things, when you use magic based on productivity. Why is important growing? Because once I showed this information to some colleagues of mine in Peru, they replied, well, okay, but what's the point? If Peru is growing, poverty reduction is working, why, Julio, when you bother to do that? If the country is growing, poverty is decreasing, why are you so obsessed with productivity? Well, I am obsessed with productivity for 3 reasons. The first one is that if you don't close the gap of productivity with the rest of the world, you're going to create social and political unrest. Because social unrest is not created based on objective levels. It's created about relative well-being. Carol Graham, which is a director of Brookings Institution, he has lots of empirical evidence showing you that political unrest, frustration among people have more to do with inequalities across countries rather than the objective value of their income. The second reason why I'm obsessed with productivity is that if you make your nation progress on productivity, you are less vulnerable towards the world. Now, in the case of Peru, because 75% of our exports are natural resource based, that means that if the price of copper decreases, we're done. We're done. Indeed, there is a study by Máximo Torero in Washington, D.C., showing that 15% decrease in copper means 1% GDP per capita decrease, recession. Incredible. So you make your country very vulnerable when you don't rely on productivity-based growth and you just rely on more capital and more people to grow. And the third reason is the velocity, is the speed in which countries could grow. If we keep doing the same things, 50 years, and then we keep doing the same thing for the next 30 years, the velocity, how fast the country is going to develop, is going to be much lower, because productivity allows you to jump. With economic growth based on accumulation of factors, you walk. Productivity makes you jump. And that's the third important reason. So, the end of the presentation, the final part of the presentation, is discussing what to do. And that's the main message of that why we are here. But now I hope that you could understand why I spent so much time talking to you all this issue before, because that's the introduction, the necessity, the more basic information that we need in order to understand what is going on. And again, because economics used to be really complex and sometimes sophisticated, I'm gonna rely on a very interesting example to understand what to do. This is a monkey, of course. But the particularity of this monkey, I don't know if some of you know, but this monkey could see just in two colors. It's proven. There are scientific. You go to YouTube, you go to search papers, and many monkeys can see just in two colors. The question is how we can see in three colors. We human beings see in three basic colors, and they combine them, and we have all the spectrum of colors that we can see. What happened? Because we come from a guy like this, that we're on the trees, and then someone decided to go to walk, and from there, we're here. So what happened in that process? So what happened is that millions of years ago, there was a monkey like this one to start seeing in three colors. And what happened with that process was something amazing. What happened was that because of the natural selection process, the monkey that starts seeing in three colors allowed to survive and to have an evolution, because he was more productive. Because seeing in three colors allowed him to see, for instance, more food, and more diverse food, and options to survive. There was a genetic change in the DNA. Something was created. But at the same time, what is as interesting as seeing in three colors was the fact that this monkey lose something. This monkey lose the capacity of hearing. When he was seeing in two colors, the capacity of hearing was as good as the cats and the dogs today, that they can hear like hundreds or even 1,000 times better than us. Why? Why when he created new DNA, why he canceled new DNA? Because he don't need it anymore. Because he can see, now he can see in three colors, that means that I don't need to hearing so well no more. So it decreased, and that's why we have a horrible hearing capacity, human beings. We believe that we hear very well, but we don't. But the third change that happened, really important, is that the monkey keeps something. What did he keep? The structure of the body. Because if you look at them, they're the same monkey. So what I'm trying to tell you is that the natural evolution process implies three changes. Three changes. When people, when families, when organizations, when nations, when animals, three things happen. First, you create new things. Secondly, you stop doing things or you cancel things. And the third one, you keep things that you're doing well. This is really important in order to run a nation. Because if we understand how this works, we can understand why revolutionaries are absolutely not an option. And they are the most irresponsible way of running a nation. These populist guys that want to do whatever they want because they want to change and revolution and make a huge transformation of the country in 5 years or 10 years, is a lie. It doesn't happen. Because things happen in this way, in these three chains. Which means not doing the same, no, doing new, but understanding that there is something that you need to keep, because nothing is just, or everything is not just horrible. So what I'm going to try to respond is how we can deal with this idea of natural evolution with Peru. We need to do new things, we need to cancel things, and we need to keep some of them. And before talking about that, I want to tell you what has been the economic approach in Peru in the 50 years. Why we are growing, the economic growth is amazing, but just based in capital and labor. And the reason is this approach. In 50 years, Peruvian authorities believed that the solution for all the problems was to promote and to put all the attention in big investment. If you push investment, if you give incentives to big investment, employment is going to be created. And because of that, it's going to be less poverty. But this approach is called the trickle down, based on natural resources. I don't care about education, I don't care about health or innovation. What I care is the investment of the big mining companies to come because they're going to create employment. And that's a problem because it's based on capital accumulation. And it's unsustainable. Because the only way to push big investment is to reduce taxes, to stop protecting the environment, to be more flexible to labor conditions. That is not well-being. But the other area, the alternative way of progressing, the way how nations progress is completely different. It's not a line, it's a circle. And the circle means that the first step of development is not investment. The first step of development is people's minds. When you invest on people's minds, starting by children, two things happen. Two things incredible happen. First, consumption explodes. When you invest in education, in the minds, in the capabilities of people, consumption jumps. And the second one, entrepreneurship. Because you're going to have a lot of ideas, a lot of initiatives to deal with. And the effect of that, the third step is investment. Investment goes when there is consumption, investment goes when there is ideas, when there are projects. Now, capital is not scarce. Capital is really abundant. Scarcity is among new ideas, new things to invest. And when investment is on place, then employment is created, and then poverty is reduced. And you know what happens when you reduce poverty? More people get into the middle classes, and the government could invest in their minds, and the circle, it's activated again. This approach, that it's based on productivity gains, and it's called middle-out economics. And it's based on investing on people's minds. In Peru, we have 200 years of being politically free. We got our independence in 200 years. But we are not economically independent. We are politically independent, but not economically, because we cannot control our destiny, because we have not done the priority, which is investing on the talent of people, on education, on innovation, on science and technology. That is the first step in the process of development. What I'm going to do here, this is my last slide, is to show you what are the things that we need to keep because we are doing very well in the last decades. What are the things that we need to cancel, and what are the things that we need to create in order to transit from economic growth based on accumulation of factors and economic growth based on productivity and the creation of that magic that I told you. The first one, the first set of policies that we need to keep are monetary policy, fiscal policy, trade policy, financial regulation, and social safety nets that Peru has lots of experience. Now, many Latin American countries go to Peru to ask for advice. How I can make a sound fiscal policy, monetary policy, because we have wonderful officials in Peru that deal with that. Why? Because we have a trauma. In the 80s, Peru has this hyperinflation. It was horrible. People left the country. Something that is happening right now in Venezuela happened exactly the same in Peru. So we had a trauma. And because of that trauma, we create these very sound policies. And now we are like an example for the world in doing that. We need to keep that. We need to keep doing that. That is good. What are the things that we don't need to do that anymore and we need just to cancel right away that is hurting us as a country? Is the pro-business policies. The market is composed by businesses and people and consumers. Having a market approach on defending the market, the free market, means defending businesses, but also consumers at the same time. In Peru, we don't have that. We have just policies focused on businesses. Well, of course, it's really common sense, because if you want a big investment to move, you need to focus, you need to give more incentives, and be in favor of business in particular. The second one is improvisation. There is no nation in the world that grow and progress that if they don't have a plan. In Peru, there is no plan almost for anything, I'm gonna explain to you some examples, really straightforward. In a family, if you receive a salary, you know how much of that salary you're gonna assign to the education of your children, right? How much for the rent. Everyone knows that. It's very basic. You start doing that at the very beginning. Well, Peru doesn't have it. We have the national budget, and we don't know why we are investing that much in health, that much in education. We don't know. We don't have any idea why we're doing that. So how do we allow the national budget every year? Just by inertia. That means if the tax revenue increase 4%, then I increase 4% to everyone. And then increase 2%, and 2% to everyone. So 10 years later, you have like a completely illogical, absurd way in which the budget is allowed. But at the same time, we don't have a plan for our budget over time. In Peru, there is not a single study of system that tells you that in the next 40 years, Peru is going to spend from 3 points of the GDP to 5 in education, in health. There is no plan at all. We don't even have a plan for infrastructure in Peru. When you buy a house, the first thing that you do is you go to the rooms and you say, which is the rooms that you would like to improve? What are the rooms that you're going to use? Basic things. In Peru, we don't have a plan to know exactly how many roads do we need, how many ports, how many highways. Everything is decided in a yearly base. Why Peruvians we don't plan and we really improvise almost everything? Because we have been going through lots of crises. And when you're going through crisis, you don't think about the future. You just think about today because you need to survive. And that means that in Peru, we need a new generation of politicians. A new generation of politicians that say, come on, I understand your trauma. Of course, I understand you. This is not a joke. You experience that. But you know what? Peru now is a different country. And we are now in the 21st century. And that means that we need to transit to modernity. So you cannot do the same. And the problem with politicians in Peru is that they belong to that generation. They're very old guys who were being in politics like 30, 40 years. And they have this trauma, and that's why they cannot make those changes. And they don't have the connection with the people because most of the population in Peru are young people who want changes. But they are not represented in the political arena. The other thing is, of course, making the state promoting businesses. If you go to Peru and talk to the officials and tell them that, they're going to tell you that you're a communist, that you are a socialist, that you are leftists, that you are the remaining of the unions of the Soviet Union. And I say, no, here in the States, the United States, I'm not sure, I don't know, I really doubt that it's a communist country. The United States government promotes businesses across the nation. I'm not talking about Korea, Singapore, or Japan, I'm talking the United States. So we need to do that. We need to realize that the market is not just magical, but we need to promote and help businesses. There are poor labor conditions, we need to solve that, but particularly I'm glad to focus this point because it's going to concern about the particularity of Peru. I told you that Peru has 85 different micro-weathers among the 105 macro-weathers in the world. That means not only that we have a lot of diversity, but also it means that we have different people thinking different things and having different backgrounds and cultural experience. What is the conclusion of that? That conflict among Peruvians have been among us always. Since the Inca Empire till now, conflict is a natural factor, is a natural way of living in Peru. So in the future, it's going to be the same because geography is not going to change. The idea of dealing with conflict means you need to create institutions that deal with conflict. Institutions that you have people there, trained, that make intelligence, that talk to people, that have the dialogue open, planifying this. We don't have that in Peru. There is no such a thing. So what happened with the mining? If Peru has a lot of mining projects in Peru, what happened when a conflict starts? Because there are many conflicts. You know what happened? The president doesn't know. The president knows the same day, because there are no intelligence working on that. What they do, they send a minister to talk to them to try to solve the problem. So conflict is really complex. We need to understand that. So that's why we don't manage that, and that creates social and political unrest. Finally, which are the things that we need to do, the new things that doesn't exist in Peru, but we need to do, we need to change, we need to convince Peruvians that in order to be better, we need to do it. It's pro-market policies. Pro-market policies, fighting with monopolies, fighting oligopolies, protecting consumers. Of course, the business, of course, promoting businesses at the same time, but protecting consumers too. Particularly, strategic planning. What is the country that we want to be, that we want to be? And in order to make a strategic planning, it's not only about policies, it's not only about technicalities, it's not about only projecting the budget. It's about selling emotions. It's about telling people what do we want to be as a Peruvians. Forget about education policy and health, because we're going to do that, of course. But first, what is the country that we want to be in differential with the others? We came from one of the more awesome empires in the world. One of the 5 most important civilizations in the world. We came from there. So we could be better. But we need to have a vision of what we want to do. And our vision in the part of the pie is to be a country that need to take advantage of the diversity. Peru has a diversity of diversities because everything is in Peru. Very few countries have that. We have the spaces for doing research in health, medicine, in food, mining, the forests, the rivers, the water, the energy, we have everything. If we combine that diversity with investing in the minds of people, we're going to jump. If we allow the national budget investing in the minds of the children, starting for them, 3 years old, and give them all they need, we're going to create a new generation of Peruvians that when they see the forest, they're going to say, oh, I'm going to take advantage of the forest because I am an engineer. Oh, there is the Pacific Ocean. I'm going to take advantage of that because I am a scientist, a Peruvian scientist. We don't have that now. So it's a combination of investing massively in talents and capabilities and combining them with the diversity of diversities that we have. Second generation reforms, that means working on property rights, fighting corruption. 20% of the national budget in Peru is stolen. 20% of the total budget is stolen by officials and politicians in Peru. You cannot run a nation when 20% of your salary. You can run a family, 20% of your family is gone because someone take it. Labor policy, of course, making a better condition for workers dealing with the informal sector. Institutional arrangement for dialogue that I already talked about, and I would like to finish with state reform. In any formal company, you know what is the line for your professional career. All of us know that you can start as an intern, and then if you do a good job, you can be hired as an assistant, and then maybe assistant of the manager, and maybe deputy manager, and so on. In most governments in the world develop that line of professional career exists. In Peru, doesn't exist. There's nothing. What is the problem with that? That the officials that are of the government are designed by political reasons. And because there is no line, the rotation of the official is really high. Rotation means that you can be in that role for 5 months, and then you're not there. I was Vice Minister of Industry, and I was there for 4 months. And then I was Deputy Prime Minister of Peru, and I was there for 6 months. 7. How would you deal with that? It's impossible. How could you design, implement, and run a health policy that takes 3, 4, 5 years if you're going to be there just 3 months? Because there is no stability in the government. So we need state reform, particularly to make the government much more efficient and more effective. When I think about my country, I think about a country that is awesome. People is amazing, hardworking. The food is incredible. People that have not gone to Peru, go to Peru because it's incredible. The number of things that you're gonna taste is amazing. The opportunities. My wife is American from New York. The first time she went to Peru with me, she told me after several days, Peru is the land of opportunities. You have everything to do. It's incredible. But at the same time, an image came to my mind. That it's an awesome country, but with this traffic. No, but I'm not talking this traffic driving. The whole country looks like this. It looks like we are just jammed. We are stuck. When I show this image, some of you start laughing. And some of you, I'm sure that the ones who laughed were Peruvians, because they understand what I'm saying. You go to Peru, there is no the rule of law. Everyone do whatever they want, because they have the power to do it. Here, you have, because there's no rule of law, you have the big guys, who has, the boss, the big boss. So there is no police officers, so they intimidate you. Oh, I'm big, so intimidate you because they have the power to do it. But you have the little ones in the motorcycles. But because they are so small, they can prevent the law. They can go around and do whatever they want. And nobody respecting the man or the woman who is driving the students to school because nobody cares about it. When this graph tells me that we have lots of opportunities, but we need to think differently. If we have been doing the same thing in 50 years, that means that doesn't work. We need to do new things. And that new things is growing in productivity, starting for investing in the minds of people, investing massively in education. Some of my friends said, oh, investing in education and in the children looks great, Julio, but the problem of this situation is that there are not police officers, so there are no authorities. And I said, yes, you're right, but who are the authorities? People. Oh, no, but the other part is that we have no technology because there are no green lights, no red lights. Okay, who made the technology? People. Oh, the roads? People. Everything starts with people. If you don't invest in human capital, if you don't invest in your people, you're not going to have a nation. And that's the starting point that we need to focus and we need to invest. And I'm sure that most Peruvians and more Latin Americans are ready for this message. This presentation that is already finished not only applies for Peru. I'm sure that if some of you are citizens from other Latin American countries will feel also related and will feel something because it's pretty similar. We need to destroy the mantra of natural resources in our continent. We need to start thinking about the engine of growth is the mind of the people, and particularly in the fourth industrial revolution that tells you that capital means nothing in comparison to invest in the mind of a child of 5 years old. Thank you very much.
questions. In case anyone's interested, just raise your hands. No mics here, nor needed. So we can start with whoever Julio.
Please you choose because I don't want to be the
Okay, the one here. So we're gonna start here.
Thank you. Thanks, great talk. Thanks so much. Given the huge percentage of commodity exports, percentage of exports, it seems to me that the mining companies or the commodity companies might have a sway or might have a power, can influence power in the country in a way that is not very democratic. What are your comments? What is keeping the country with this inertia over such a long period of time? Could it be those who profit from the commodity economy?
Well, it's a combination of factors, but I will point out 2 or 3. The first one is that with this approach, a lot of people got a lot of money. Okay. Of course, not the majority is gaining from this, but some of them, a small fraction with a lot of power, it's gaining a lot. So the incentive for that elite to make changes is really small. So that's the first one. The second one is that for a populist politician, it's much better not to make changes. Why? Because he do anything, I mean the price of copper goes up, that's it, no more. One example is the government that we have in 2006 and 2011, that more than 70% of economic growth was explained by the price of copper, not by the policies of the government. So there are very strong incentives to keep things like that, because in this chaos, many people are doing great because of the distribution of the gains. I really don't think that this is impossible. I don't think that it's impossible because politics could do the difference if we have a new generation of politicians. And I really believe that now it's happening in Peru. When you talk to young people in Peru, they are completely different people, like 20 years ago. They believe in themselves. They have their smartphones, which is have a huge impact. Because 20 years ago, 25-year-old, the only reality that you have were your surroundings. Now they have the smartphone and they say how people live in Korea, how people live in France, how people live in the States. That their expectations has increased. So I really believe that they are more ready to accept changes. But changes that not come just overnight, as I already said. Changes that come progressively according to our priorities.
So we're gonna have 1, 2, anyone else? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah, so understanding that you mentioned 60% of the demographic is young, what do you see are the major challenges in your own election or other politicians like yourself that are targeting this population, but it's still, I see it, I'm from Colombia and I still see it that people want change, but it's still very difficult to get those politicians that are championing the change to get them elected. What are the roadblocks for you, for example?
I don't know if I understand well your question. I'm going to address it and then you tell me. Most of the population, the voting population in Peru are young people and they are thinking differently. When I got into politics for the first time, my first advisors, the dinosaurs, told me that, oh, you cannot lie to people because people don't like receiving bad news. This is the ABC of politics. Ah, okay, that's interesting. You need to tell people whatever they want to hear, to listen, because you don't want to give them bad news, okay? But I realized that that's completely a myth. That's not true. Now, young people appreciate that you tell us the truth. People can absorb the truth in the way you communicate it. For instance, crime. 95% of people in Peru wants the army forces on the streets to kill the delinquents who rob the cellular phones. Okay, 95%. I've been interviewed in TV and radio about that, and I said, no, I disagree about that. But Señor Guzmán, 95% of Peruvians want that. How do you say that? You're gonna lose votes. No, I'm not. Because I'm gonna explain why. You know what's gonna happen if we put soldiers on the streets? They're gonna start killing people. Not because they are bad people. It's because they're not trained to deal with crime, stealing smartphones. Soldiers are prepared. When something moves, run. That happened in El Salvador. And that happened in another country in Africa. Do you want that in Peru? People appreciate that. One of the videos that went viral in Peru was one of my interviews in radio that the journalist asked me, in what time Peru is going to change? And my response was, Peru is not going to change in 5 years. When I became president and I finished the presidency, Peru is going to improve, but it's not going to change, it's not going to transform because countries don't do that. Politicians don't need to lie to people. In 5 years, we can do a lot of things, but we're not going to transform the country because the country is going to transform in 30 years. But we need to start now. So a traditional politician could tell you, you made a mistake. Well, we went to Twitter and Facebook and it was amazing. Young people said, this is the politician that we want to tell us the truth, that you can do several things, but you are not, lying to us. So that's one thing. Don't lie to people. It's the way that you explain to them how to get that, and people appreciate that. Secondly, show an organization. People don't like outsiders or populists or caudillos that they say, I am the savior of the country. That it's no longer. You need to build an organization and show them that there is a team behind that. And they know the plans and they know how to do it. So those are two things that we are working really, really hard. And we are having the attraction of young people. And I would say a third one is explaining them why, which is very important. People say, oh, we're going to do education reform. We're going to do health reform. Why? Explain me why this is going to transform. That has changed a lot in Peru. 20 years ago, you said, I'm going to create 1 million jobs. Oh, great. Nobody asked you how. Now, that's not possible in Peru. Because most people, it's young people, and they are connected, and they are getting educated, they want those kinds of explanation, and they appreciate that. So, politics has become much more horizontal. Much more horizontal. In which the way, if you want to connect to people through emotions, you need to show them as yourself. Talking with mistakes, talking colloquially, talking as you talk with your children or you talk with your family, they appreciate that. It's not the traditional politics like most people tell you or advise you to do. The more natural you are, the more you're gonna connect to the more you're gonna to people. People love pictures or videos of myself with my back, in my t-shirt, with my blue jeans, and being on the. I said, man, this is the candidate, but it could be the regular guy. Oh, he's not gonna be respected because presidential candidates they show in other ways. No, it's the way around. Young people think completely different. You just be yourself, don't lie to them, show an organization that you can do it with that team, and I believe you're going to have that connection.
What was number 3?
So we're seeing nowadays the rise of xenophobic feelings around the world. And you can see that also in Peru. Now that there's a large immigration of Venezuelans from the country into Peru. So my question is, how do you see the government, what's the best way for the government to deal with this such sentiment from Peruvians, right? The resistance from immigration. Because you said it yourself, that diversity is very important for productivity. How can the government facilitate the integration of new people?
First of all, to have a position about that. You cannot develop a communication strategy if you don't have a position. What is your position? Against or in favor of immigration? In our case, we believe that every single people that get into the country is gonna sum up for just statistical reasons. But it's pretty basic. There are a lot of studies made by Ricardo Hausmann in different parts of the world showing how immigration is much better for every country. So that our position is in favor of that. But that's not enough. Because the second thing that you need to do is to recognize the suffering of some people. If you are not empathetic with people that are really suffering, because of some dimension of immigration, you're lost because you are insensitive with that people and you disconnect with that people. Which is true in Peru, is that 60% of Venezuelans coming to Peru, they have high degrees. They have master's degrees, PhDs. 60% are very well educated, and 40 are low productivity income. They are low productivity jobs. So there is a fraction in Peru that is really suffering because they are competing in the informal sectors. Those 40% of Venezuelans that go to Peru, they go to the streets to sell candies, to sell sandwiches. They want to live honestly, but they compete with Peruvian because 75% of the jobs in Peru are informal. So the second thing that you need to do is not say, oh, immigration is great to Peru, so I'm going to force that, I don't care about them. No, you need to say, this is good for the country, I'm going to go that, but I need to recognize the suffering of the people that are being affected for that. You connect to people. Not what politicians are doing now in Peru. In xenophobia, they're on the streams. Oh, immigration is great, everything is great. On the other side, they say, no, it's horrible. It's in the middle. Immigration is good for the country because new people with new knowledge are coming, but we need to do something about those who are suffering. What we can do? I will tell you two things. Things putting order. Because one thing is admitting people that are coming from other countries because they want to survive, but we need to do some protocols and norms. Order. That's not happening in Peru. No order at all. At the very beginning, we need to allow just honest people to come, not delinquents or crimes that are registered in other countries that they know that they have this background, just for starting for that, so some order. And the second thing is the problem of people competing in the streets with Venezuelans, Peruvians and Venezuelans, is not Peruvians' fault. It's not Venezuelans' fault. It's the failure of government to create new jobs opportunities. How are you going to absorb this labor force if 75% of your exports are natural resources? It's impossible. So it's a failure of the government, it's a failure of the nation to create those opportunities. Some of the ways to dealing with that, some government programs that deal with jobs in that sector. For instance, one is Compra Mi Perú. It's a very successful program that allows that all of the small companies could create textiles for the government in a specific period of time. That creates a lot of jobs in a specific period of time, let's say 2 years or 3 years, and things like that. But it's much complex than just saying I agree or I disagree. You need to have a plan to communicate and to create compensatory policies for those who are suffering.
Who was for?
We'll go first. Thank you. So, thanks for the talk. I have actually two questions. The first one, in several opportunities you mentioned, or you compare Peru's model with the U.S. model. So my question goes to, what is your position regarding these, the role model that can play U.S. with all our prudent policies? Or, put in other ways, what do you think about the transnational process that sometimes political regimes face? And the second question is, most of your proposals sounds very good, but you know that executive power cannot do that alone. So how do you think to implement that, working with the Congress, courts and everything?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The first question is that there is no single economic model for all the countries in the world. That doesn't exist. One of the lessons of the Cold War, of the ideas of the Cold War, was that there was two models, capitalism and central plan economies. And then after that, at the Muro de Berlin, we realized that there is no single model. There are not 3, there are not 4, there are not 6. It's just every country needs to discover their own model of progress. There are basic things that we need to respect. Yes, free market. Yes, defending human rights. Yes, democracy, of course, international justice, protecting the environment. Okay, that's the basic thing. But the other stuff, the rest, that is a lot of stuff, it should be discovered by the own country. There should be a self-discovering process in which you build your own approach. What is that approach? What is the model that we believe could work for Peru? is combining our diversity of diversities with investing massively in education. I believe that Peru could build a new way of creating well-being if we take advantage of what nature gave us, but we combine that with the minds of Peruvians. That is not happening right now. It's a different way. You see countries like Israel. Israel is a country that no natural resources. They built the nation in other ways, with investing lots of capital. You have countries like Canada. They have a combination of natural resources and investment in science and technology. The States is a combination of both, natural resources and everything. You have different kinds. But Peru is the kind of country that have lots of natural resources, incredible amount, even higher than all of these countries that I told you about, but talent and capacity is almost unexistent. So I believe that this could be one way of it, respecting the basic international values, but discovering new ways of doing things. Concerning the second, absolutely correct. All these measures and new policies that need to be implemented in Peru, they're not going to be done by the president, because according to the constitution, you need the help of Congress too, and other branches of the government, like the judiciary, for instance. That's the reason why you need to build an organization. Because you can be the same what is going on in Peru now. That the Congress, the Peruvian Congress now, is the worst Congress in the Peruvian history, in which 14 congressmen are related to narcotráfico, to drug trafficking. It's incredible. If you asked me 20 years ago, or Julio, in the next 20 years, there will be one time in which more than 10 congressmen will be interacting with narcos, I would say, like a Hollywood story. Well, this is happening now in Peru. And not only with narcos, but also with the mafias in the illegal mining and illegal forestry. It's incredible. And that happened because culturally, we have thought mistakenly that elections is about one person, the president. And that's not true. Elections is about the president, but also the congressman, but also the officials that are more important, the bureaucrats, but also the political operators. There's a team. And that takes time, because you don't need to identify them, but also train them, but also interacting, creating a team. And that's our purpose. The Purple Party is also different because it doesn't have my name. One of the things that is really common in Peru, for those that don't know Peru, is that most political parties has the name of the candidate, or the initials of the candidate, or something about the candidate. Purple Party doesn't have anything to do with Julio Guzmán. Nothing to do, because we want to build an organization, an institution with new people, with citizens that decided to live their family lives and to get into politics. Yesterday, in Columbia University, I said that the worst namer of an old-fashioned politician, the worst namer is that one regular citizen decided to get into politics. That's the worst namer, because regular citizens act, talk, behave, and want what the rest of the citizens want. And they don't. And the second nightmare is finding that people, those regular citizens, building a true organization that could finally defeat them, not only in the election process, but also when it's in the government, in the executive branch.
When you study economic development, when I researched about this, you found a strong connection between developed countries and the rule of law, right? And if you analyze developed countries, you'll find out that almost in all of them, they believe in the role of the state, they believe in the judiciary, they respect property rights, they perform contracts, right? And I think that a question without an answer is, and it's actually strongly connected with what you said, is that in order to encourage or to promote the rule of law, you have to change the mindset of people. So my first question is, how can you achieve this? I mean, it's almost a question without an answer. I mean, like, this is something that I have no idea how to achieve it. And the second is that, I mean, when you made this interesting presentation, you talk about a lot of ingredients they have to put in a pot, but this is something that you have to do step by step. So my question is where to start, because you cannot put all of them at the same time.
Yeah, that's great. Very interesting question. Thank you so much. The first one, as you said, the rule of law is something that is clear and is not, because it's clear what it means, but it's really complex and difficult to understand what it is particularly. I would say that the rule of law is one thing. It's just to have clear rules for everyone, and that could be treated equal, not because of a moral or an ethical reason only, but also because when you treat equal to everyone, you're gonna promote the capacity and the talents of the people who is the best, who promote growth and creativity and whatever. Creativity and innovation is related with the rule of law. Rule of law is not about just the judiciary. It's about that if you have a great idea, you're gonna succeed because you have the same rules as everyone. The rule of law. How to do that? There are different ways, but I would like to focus on two. The first one is education. We need to start for that. I really, at the very beginning, I care when someone tells me, oh, but this is gonna take 20 years. Yes, it takes 20 years. Like other countries in the world, Peru has been decades with problems, and you want me to tell you that in 5 years we're gonna change and we're gonna build the rule of law? No, it's gonna take time. But the first is people. We need to invest in education, and we have more than 30 different policies in education to deal with that, which is not the topic of this presentation. But the second one, which I really believe, is that we human beings as primates, we used to imitate behaviors. Like we do in our own families. We somehow imitate the behavior of our mother or our father, etc. So in nations, I really believe that citizens imitate the behaviors of their authorities because they see us as a role models. If you have authorities in Peru that all the presidents in Peru that are living are involved in corruption cases, all of them. What is this message that you are giving to the regular citizen? If the president steals, why not me? Why not me? I was in Uruguay months ago talking to a taxi driver and said, how many presidents are still alive? Former president here in Uruguay. He told me 4. And how many of them are being prosecuted or in jail? And the taxi driver he stopped watching the transit and said, what? I said, yes, how many are in jail? None. Those things doesn't happen in Uruguay. Yeah, there is corruption, yes, but the president, come on, please. Well, in Peru, all of them, even the ones who are dead, they die with process open. So one of the things that is revolutionary for Peru, and I also tell that in TV and radio, is that when I finish my government and people see that my salary is exactly the same as when I started, and when people see that I will return to my rent apartment, living with my 4 children and my wife, then the country is gonna change. Not only for the policies in these 5 years, but when I leave and people see that I return to the rented apartment in the same place with my same level of income, that is gonna be a huge impact in the country, because most young people are gonna say, it's possible. We can do it. We can do it. And I really believe that doing that, you build in somehow rule of law to convince people that there are things that are possible.
Final question.
Yeah. How would your presidency address a corrupt judiciary and a malfunctioning government? And let me qualify those questions. We have already faced corrupt judiciary when the party was actually taken out of the past presidential running. And we now have in Peru a very big scandal of how corrupt judiciary is. So how would you take advantage of perhaps momentum if this continues to address that from presidency? One question. And the second one is, and perhaps that would be a personal assessment, is that what we are seeing there is actually the failure of the government, not necessarily the failure of the private sector. And in that sense, when you said if turnover is like 5 months for a senior official in Peru, that's something you have experienced, how would you actually do something in 5 years with those two big issues? And I'm not talking about like the illegal mining and the logging and the narco trafficking already there.
You're absolutely right. I'm going to start for the second question because it's as you said, the problem is not with the government only, it's with the private sector. And when you see this chaos, it's not chaos in the state, it's also chaos in the private sector. It's the same mess that we have there. You are absolutely right. The first question about the judiciary, I first want to put in context people that are not Peruvian of what's going on here because it's crazy. It looks like a movie. What happened is that in Peru, there's a lot of corruption and people know who politicians have stolen or not, congressmen. Everyone knows who steals and who not, okay? But the difference, what is going on in Peru these weeks, is that they have been released thousands of audios showing the conversations between the congressmen, the judges, the politicians, the businessmen, bribing among themselves and asking for favors. And everything has been transparent. This is absolutely crazy. And what's happening is that the Peruvian population already knew about this, but now they have the proof. So what is this? Most Peruvians believe that this is horrible, that this is outrageous what's going on. I have another lecture. I think that this is a great opportunity, and we are experiencing a great opportunity. When the night became darker, it means that the morning is coming, right? Well, when you see all this information, the reform of the judiciary could happen now. It couldn't happen 20 years ago with everybody knew. But now with the evidence, we can make that reform to happen. Finally. So what's happening right now is the current president is doing the best that he can, but he doesn't have the majority of Congress. And Congress is preventing the judiciary reform because all of them are involved in the audits. Some of the congressmen, the most known, they are on the audits, so they don't want the reform. So what we're gonna do when we get there is to do what we need to do, is the constitutional reforms for the judiciary reforms. That means that the rules of the game need to be changed in order to select better judges. Now in Peru, just to explain you the situation, it's really simple. There is a group of people, there are 7 people who decide who the judges are gonna be, the thousands of judges. 7 people decide who's gonna be the judges in Peru, in the whole nation. And how those 7 people are selected? According to the constitution, 1 in representation of the public universities, other of the private universities, other to the professional guilds. All these organizations are corrupt. So they select corrupt people. Why? Because they know that they're gonna select the judges. So that's the starting point that we need to change. And in order to change that, we need to change the constitution. That's why we need to build an organization and put good congressmen there in order to make those changes. So this is one, there are more things to do, but I believe that this is the more important thing that we need to do is changes in the way that these people are selected. Because if you change them, the quality of the judges are gonna change almost immediately. And you don't need to wait 20 years. If you make this reform in 6 months, you can have new judges with different profiles. Thank you so much for being here. I just realized that it's almost 2 p.m. and I would like to thank you for that because we have been here 2 hours. And I really hope that this will help us, all of us, to think about not only Peru, but Latin America. And the message is that we need to do things differently. Thinking about what is important, and what is important is the minds of people. So thank you very much.